5 winters had passed since the white wolf vanished without a trace, swallowed by the forest and silence. Yet every night in his dreams, he still felt her warmth at his side, still heard the whisper of her breath against the dark. He had buried the hope. Long ago told himself it was over. But then the howl came low and trembling through the trees, not wild, not distant, but personal, like a memory calling his name, a sound, too full of pain to be forgotten, too real to be imagined. And in that moment, something ancient stirred in him. Something he thought time had broken. The bond they shared had no words, no reason, no end, only a gravity pulling across years, and silence drawing him back to the place where loss began, and where maybe it, could finally end. Each morning, Eli rose before the sun, when the frost still clung to the window panes, and the light outside was the color of old bones. He moved slowly through the cabin, lighting the stove with the same care as always, setting 2 bowls. On the floor, out of habit, before quietly putting one away, he made his tea, watching the steam curl like breath in the cold air, and sat in the same worn chair facing the trees where she used to sit silent beside him, her eyes scanning the world, as if listening for something he could never hear. Now he watched alone. The forest unchanged, and yet entirely different without her. Each crackling branch outside stirred something beneath his ribs, something unfinished when he walked the trail behind the house. He often turned without thinking, as if expecting to see her pale shape darting through the snow. But there was only stillness, only the hush of winter and the weight of memories he carried like stones in his coat pockets, not heavy enough to crush him, but enough to keep him from ever feeling light again. The wind howled that night louder than usual, thrashing the trees and rattling the windows, as if warning him of something just beyond the edge of knowing when morning came. The world was white and still. But her presence was gone, not faded, not dimmed, just gone. The gate hung open, swinging slightly in the wind, and her tracks led out into the endless snow. He ran, calling her name through the forest, his voice sharp with panic, breathless with disbelief. He followed the trail until it vanished into wind-blown drifts, and when there was nothing left but white, he stood alone, lungs burning, heartbreaking, unable to understand how the world could still exist without her in it. The hours bled into days, and the days collapsed into a quiet that pressed against his chest like stone. People came, offered words shallow and soft, but none reached the place where the ache lived. He stopped answering. Their knocks stopped, watching the horizon stopped, speaking altogether. And Luna too changed. Wherever she was, the world had shifted. She no longer trusted it. The scent of him long faded, the warmth of his hand. A distant ache she carried, both the wild and the wound within her. A creature torn from her, center-wandering, but never belonging. And so the years passed, each one quieter than the last. Each season, a shadow of the one before, with both of them suspended in their own silence, shaped by the same moment of absence, neither moving forward, neither fully alive, only existing in the long echo of what was lost. Let me pause here for just a moment and ask you, where are you listening from right now? Have you ever had someone remember you after years apart? Maybe a friend, a pet, someone you thought was lost to time. If this story touches something in you, if you believe that some bonds never truly break, then follow along. There's much more to come, and every chapter will speak to the heart. He hadn't planned to leave the cabin that day. The sky was iron grey, the wind bitter against the glass. But then a sound cut through the stillness, unlike anything he'd heard in years, long and low. Not just wild, but mournful, as if the forest itself were. Grieving Eli froze the cup in his hand, trembling. The sound was distant, yet unmistakable. It wasn't just a wolf. It was a memory howling through time, something ancient and intimate rising from the cold. He opened the door, heart pounding, unsure whether it was madness or instinct. Pulling him outside, he stood in the snow. Listening again, the second howl came fractured and aching, And suddenly he was no longer in the present. He was back in that first winter with Luna, her breath in the dark, her eyes catching the firelight, her fur against his shaking fingers. He saw it all as if no time had passed, and for a moment the weight of the years lifted. But then came the doubt. Could it really be her? Could memory be that strong? Could she have survived? Would she even remember him? The mind warned him against false hope, told him the wild forgets. But the heart whispered otherwise, and it was the heart he followed packing slowly. Hands shaking, with something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose fear the fragile, thread of belief. Every sound on the trail made his pulse race. Every shadow stirred the ache of what if. But still he walked into the cold, into the unknown. Not because he was sure, but because something deep within him already knew something more, powerful than logic, more enduring than time was calling him home. Snow fell softly around the clearing, muffling sound wrapping the moment in a hush, so complete it felt sacred. Eli stood at the edge, breath-caught legs, frozen heart louder than the wind, and there she was standing still as stone, her white coat dusted with grey, her ribs faintly visible under winter fur, but her eyes were the same deep amber, flecked with gold and full of something that stopped the world. She didn't run, she didn't growl. She just stared as if looking through years, searching for a thread that had never fully broken. Eli whispered her name barely audible, not daring to take a step, afraid one move might shatter the illusion. But it wasn't an illusion he saw. The twitch of her ears, the slightest tilt of her head. Something inside her flickered a shiver, not of cold, but of memory. She took a step, then another slow, deliberate, her eyes never leaving his face, and Eli felt the tears before he knew he was crying. His hands were open palms trembling, and still he didn't move, not until she closed the distance nose to his coat, inhaling deeply. Her whole body trembling as if waking from a long, long sleep, and then she pressed into him, her weight soft but certain, her head resting where it always had against his chest, and in that silent collapse, every fear, every question, every mile between them dissolved, she remembered, and so did he, not just the moments, not just the place, but the feeling, the truth of belonging, of being seen, of being found. And as he dropped to his knees, arms around her fur warm against his cheek, the forest disappeared. Time disappeared. And all that remained was the bond that had never once let go. The path home was quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps side by side, soft in the snow. No leash, no words, just breath and presence the way it used to be. Eli glanced at her now and then, not to check if she was following, but to be sure it was real each time her eyes met his, steady and unafraid. Something loosened in his chest at the cabin door. He paused, unsure if she'd cross that threshold again, but she stepped in without hesitation, as if no time had passed, as if the years apart had only been a blink. She circled the room once, nose brushing, old corners, familiar scents rising from worn wood, then settled by the hearth in the exact place she used to sleep, curling her body into a shape memory had never let him forget. Eli lowered himself into the chair, his hands still trembling, but now from something softer, something close to wonder. He spoke her name gently, and she looked up, not startled, not wild, just present her ears twitching with the sound of his voice, and he smiled the kind of smile he hadn't worn in years. Small but honest. That night, he didn't light a lamp. He sat with her in the quiet, watching the fire flicker shadows dancing on the walls. Every so often she would press her head against his leg, and he would place his hand on her fur, and in those small moments, something changed the silence no longer, echoed it, embraced every heartbeat, every glance, every breath they shared, said one thing I remember, I stayed, I came back, and slowly the ache that had lived in him for so long began to ease, not all at once, but like thawing, ground softening beneath the snow. Their wounds were not erased, but they were no longer alone in them, And in that quiet, steady night while the snow fell beyond the windows, Eli finally understood. Not all love fades. Some love waits. And if you listen closely, even in silence, it will call you home. Some bonds do not break with time. They do not vanish in silence or fade with distance. They wait quietly beneath the noise of life, beneath the ache of memory, beneath the weight of what was lost, and when the moment is right, they return. Not with thunder, but with stillness, with a single look, a familiar breath, a heartbeat remembered. And in that quiet, everything changes. Pain softens the world, steadies, and what was once broken begins to mend. Because true connection does not ask for proof or permission. It simply endures, waiting for the hour it is needed most to arrive and bring you home.